Welcome to Jazz Piano Daily 141. Now we are back to our series, How to Easily Play from Fakebooks. This is part number 6, and today we are going to be talking about bass lines. So we've talked about bass lines before in Jazz Piano Daily, so if you need kind of a review on that, you can go back to some of the previous lessons on bass lines. Let me play this for you just so you can hear the sound of it, and then we're going to break it down. Here we go. All right, so right hand is all the same, okay? So we're not doing anything different in the right hand, but I am going to start to talk about how to start to do some fills and kind of play around with the melody in a future part of this, How to Play from Fakebooks. Today, though, is just the bass line. So let's play the bass line. Let me blow up the music here. And let's spend some time with this bass line and talk about what's going on here. So first of all, I'm utilizing the alternate chords. I like that D7, the D flat 7, and I also like that A7 in there as well. So that's what I'm doing. Okay, so first of all, from the C minor, so notice I'm just playing the root and the fifth. Remember, a lot of times with the bass line, root 5 root is more than enough, okay? So that's always a good go-to. The other thing to remember is when you start the chord, make sure you're playing the root. Now, bear in mind, take these rules with a grain of salt. As you get more advanced, you'll realize that, I can change that around if I want. But if you want a bass line that's going to sound good right away, every time you have a new chord, make sure you're playing the root of that chord. In other words, if I started with the fifth and then went to the root, hear how that just... That doesn't sound as good as, right? That sounds much better because I'm hitting the root of the chord when the chord sounds, right? Or when the chord is presented in the music. All right, so I'm starting with the root, then I go to the fifth. Now when I go to D flat, that's one beat apiece. Guess what? All I have time for is root, root. That's it. So that's all I did was just play the root and then the root. Simple. Now when I went back to C minor, I went to the root and the fifth again. When I go to A flat, well, what do? Hit the A flat. Now I went to the fifth, but you'll notice here I also added in another eighth note. Okay, so before we were doing the bass line, it was mostly just quarter notes. Now I'm adding in some eighth notes and some triplets, a little bit of walk-up kind of stuff you'll see in this bass line. So I added in an eighth note, and what did I do? I just walked right down to my C. Okay, so I put the D in there, and that takes me right down to that C, which is coming up right down here. All right, so let's move down. So then I'm at the C, and then I go to the G, and now where do I go? A, right, because that's the root of the chord. And then now I do this half-step approach, the E flat, which also happens to be my flat 5 from the A minor 7 flat 5 chord. So I do that half-step approach into the D, and then check this one out. All right, so let's talk about what's going on here. So I have my D minor 7 flat 5 to my G7. So the right hand chords, I'm just playing my rootless chords. Okay, that's all I'm doing. That's my G7 altered chord. Right, so the D minor, and I get this nice walk up in which I'm walking right up to the G. Now, when you're doing these walk-ups, almost never do you go a half step. You almost always go a whole step and then chromatic. Listen to what happens if I do a half step. Right? First of all, there's too many notes. Let's say I leave out maybe that note. Listen to that. Versus this. The whole step usually sounds better. And it's kind of weird because you might look at that and say, wait a second, but that's an E natural on a C minor sound. Yeah, it still sounds good though. Because that tension that's created by that E is resolved very quickly. Okay? Now, if you really like that sound of the E flat, you could do it. right? Remember, this stuff is all, you know, kind of free form. You can do pretty much whatever you want as long as you like the sound of it and you can back it up, right? You don't want to just play anything and just simply say, well, I just felt like playing it. Like, it's going to sound like garbage, right? So as long as you can kind of back it up like, oh, I like that sound and that's what I'm going for, right? Fine. Go ahead and do it. And now I go to the G, and what do? Just the octave. That's it. I don't have to do anything crazy there. Just move to the octave. And then I go back to the C, D, D flat, C, G, and now A. Now this is kind of cool. What I did here is this A7, then moving to A flat, then moving to G. These are all what? A half step, right? So A flat, G, it's all moving by a half step. So when I have those chords moving by a half step, I could just play root, 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 root. And that's what I did. Root, 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 root. Then I go to the G. Now I don't play the G twice. Instead I go to the 5th of G. And then now I'm back to my C. And then I do this little walk up. And what was the walk up I did? I used a triplet. And I just outlined my C minor chord. Okay, so now let me play the entire bass line again. I'm going to do it nice and slow. Try playing it along with me. We'll put the metronome on. Here we go. All right, you know what? I actually want to slow the metronome down for you a little bit. I'm going to bring it down to 70 for you. That's a little bit better. And I also want to give you a count off. 1, 2, here we go. With the right hand. All right, so not an overly complicated, but it does take some time to get down. So what I want you to do is I really want you to focus on trying to get this bass line down, because what we're going to do is we're going to start to add some improvisation onto this. So we're going to start to add some improv to it, but you cannot add improvisation if the left hand is not absolutely solid, right? You really have to have that left hand solid before you add on the improvisation. So if you want to be able to improvise over this bass line, really work the next couple of weeks of trying to get this bass line down, okay? And I also want to remind you that these are your lessons, right? So that means that you could use them however you want. Just because I come out with a lesson every day doesn't mean that you have to try and master a lesson every day, all right? So if you want to spend some time on this and just kind of pause on the other daily lessons, that's fine. Okay, it's okay to just kind of dive in for a little bit on one particular lesson. Okay, so anyway, have fun, and I'll see you in the next lesson. To get the first 45 pages of music for free, just go back to jazzpianodaily.com. If you liked the video, please be sure to click the like button and also subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. To watch the rest of the lessons in this series, just click on the playlist to the right of this arrow. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you in the next video.